All right, welcome everybody. Appreciate everyone who could log in today. We got a couple more people that are going to be joining us here, excuse me, but we're going to go ahead and get started in the interest of time. We've got a full session here. We've got a didactic presentation as well as a discussion forum presentation today during the session. We're going to start with the didactic from Lori, which I'll have her introduce herself here shortly and get started. But for those of you who just joined, if you haven't put your information into the chat, go ahead and drop that in there. We're looking for your name, your email, and your organization. If you have any questions during any of the presentations, you can put your questions in the chat. We can do the hand raise function or just unmute when we get to that part of the presentation. And if there's any issues tech-wise, please let us know in the chat as well. We'll try to navigate those. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lori. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and you still have the screen sharing, so you should be all set.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jay. Hi, everyone. My name's Lori Fritsch. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as an assistant director with Hokie Wellness at Virginia Tech. And I will be talking about digital well-being today. So I just shared the link to my slide deck for you all to explore. You'll notice like the slide is there, but then any of the research that I point to is linked in the slide notes. So feel free to explore those as well. I'm just going to go ahead and get this started. Sorry, went backwards here. Oh my goodness. Look at this. Sorry about that. My Zoom skills are a little bit rusty, fortunately or unfortunately. Here we go. So just a little bit of a backstory. I began creating digital well-being practices and programming in around 2017, when historically I work with a peer education team and train those students to teach about various health topics related to college health. So sleep, body image, nutrition, sexual health, helping friends in distress, and tobacco treatment. So the year that this occurred, we have a cohort of students, and we typically take them on like a second year team building trip. And that year we happened to be going whitewater rafting. And I said, keep your phones away the entire time we're going on this trip. And when you're whitewater rafting, you're holding onto a paddle for dear life. So there's no room for cell phones, which is lovely. And then on the way home, well, we get back to campus and the students were just so excited that they didn't have to go to their phone. They were like, oh, it's so nice to not have to be on my phone the whole time. And I said, you all know you can choose to not go on your phone whenever you want. And they looked at me like I had three heads. So I thought, gosh, I have noticed, because I had been working in the context of college health, peer education at Virginia Tech since 2000, I really started to see a shift in how our students were engaging with one another. And I had this hunch that phones were part of the reason. So I started trying to find any kind of data, research to support my thought process that devices are changing the mental health of our students and how they're engaging with one another. And I couldn't really find too much. Finally, I did come across some work by Dr. David Greenfield, who is a psychiatry professor at UConn, and he has a digital wellness, like a digital detox establishment in Massachusetts as well. And at the core of his work, he really started working on digital addiction in the early 90s with porn and internet, and has since evolved into phone use as well. But my whole goal when I started looking into this was to just create programming and share it with other schools because nothing existed. So I'm so thankful to be here today and to have the opportunity to share with you all. My goals for today are to help us identify the impacts of device use on a college student, learn about evidence-backed and student-informed interventions, and finally discuss resources and digital well-being practices that you can start using with your students today. So after 2017, I spent that year sort of building a program. And then we had a solid program base, but I realized we could be teaching programs all day long and still not make the impact that needed to be made on our campus. So I knew I needed to go bigger, and then COVID hit. So we went home, and of course, I look at this a lot in the context of nicotine addiction, because I'm a certified tobacco treatment specialist, and I could sort of think about when looking at device use, we sort of think, oh, I think this is bad. There's some evidence stating it's bad. But here we go. We're all going to be using it and figure it out later. And I think that when big tobacco came out, I think, of course, same sort of process. We realized that it was more than just, inhaling something, that there were going to be some long-term consequences. And I feel like that's sort of the state we're in. And now we're trying to scramble backwards. So thank goodness we had our devices when COVID hit. They did serve as a lifeline for us. They did keep us connected and feel like we had some way to see our friends and loved ones. And then we came back to work, back to campus, and what we know is that, of course, the uptake of how we were using our devices increased exponentially. And what we also observed was our students started to lose, or maybe never gain, the social skills, the in-person skills that are needed for deep connection. So in looking at our American College Health Assessment, National College Health Assessment, American College Health Association, National College Health Assessment data, in 2021, we were really looking at some facets of device use. First one was procrastination. And so we knew that within the last 12 months, 75% of our students reported having problems or challenges with procrastination, and that it was causing them distress and negatively impacting their academic performance. We also know that our students are, of course, using mindless scrolling as a source of disconnection or escaping from uncomfortable feelings. And we're also using it for attention-seeking behaviors. And finally, I think that when I talk with both faculty and students alike, we are feeling very overwhelmed by notifications, and we don't really have policies in place that give us a right to disconnect. We still haven't structured a way to communicate effective digital boundaries. And so these are the sort of things that I'm trying to help both our faculty and our students figure out. So I'm going to try to cite some interesting studies along the way, but I want to also mention when we did come back to campus, I once again knew that we needed to go bigger. And I did approach our administration at the end of spring of 2022. And I said, I need to create some very high-end environmental practices, because it can't just be at this individual level, small group level of education. We need to be targeting our students and creating an environment at Virginia Tech that supports digital well-being. And it needs to be something that is sort of interfacing with them everywhere. So I had been following the work of Christina Crook, who wrote The Joy of Missing Out. She's an author, and she also has a JOMO platform, which I've shared the information about on this slide deck. And she and I worked together throughout the course of last year to develop a series of interventions. And so I will be sharing what we did to elevate digital well-being practices at the Virginia Tech campus. But I was really lucky because our administration really listened to my pitch and very much believed in digital well-being as a platform at Virginia Tech. So I was able to receive financial support and bring on a thought partner in Christina Crook. And together we have developed these practices. We are currently testing through an IRB study, a 4-week digital well-being challenge that I will share as well. So one of the things that we looked at is screen time use. And I think a lot of us think, oh, well, if I enjoy being on Netflix for some of the time, surely more of the time is better. And Moment Time Screen Tracker is an app that tracks time in certain apps. And what they did was they looked at over 200,000 iPhone users and collected their data and reflections on their use. And what was really interesting is we found that the time to happiness was much shorter, of course, than the time to unhappiness. And it was more pronounced in apps where you could just roll right into the next thing. So there was no pagination, there was endless scrolling, or like Netflix, you can just roll into the next video. So you'll see here, for example, it took about 22 minutes per day on Facebook to achieve their happy level. And once a person goes into Facebook for 59 minutes, they're actually reaching a much more unhappy state. So about 2.4 times the amount of happy time. And that was a trend across all of these. And I think that's really important to sort of name, because we all sort of go into our phones for different reasons, but we end up being trapped in there. And our intentions for going into a certain app really result in different outcomes than our initial reason for going in. So we know the power of a lot of these apps, and what happens is we're anticipating something really great when we go into maybe a YouTube video. We're like, oh, I can't wait to see a YouTube video about cute puppies. And we're anticipating the cute puppy video, and that anticipation produces about twice as much dopamine, so our reward chemical, than when we actually find the cute puppy video. So when we find the thing we're looking for, we're like, oh, yay, I found it. But then we want to find another one. And it's really that intermittent variable reinforcement schedule that keeps us coming back for more. And you'll see this with gaming, you'll see this with social media. It's the anticipation. We never know what we're going to get, when we're going to get it, or how good it's going to be. And so when we're looking at device use, we don't want to frame people in a moment of shame. We want to really blame big tech rather than blaming a person for not having willpower to get off. So we do know from studies that I have a lot of links to in this particular slide that the impacts of device use are very wide. It decreases our college students' ability to focus. And I want to put a caveat here. While I'm focusing on college students, and a lot of this research is connected to them, there's also tons of research to connect to children and to adults as well. I can have a very similar conversation with my 15-year-old daughter, with a 20-year-old student, with a 40-year-old colleague, or a 70-year-old parent. And we're all figuring this out together because the iPhone was created in 2007. We were all existing when it was released. And because there's no set of rules, it's the Wild West. We are still trying to figure out, how do we live in harmony with a device, with technology that's most likely not going to go away. And unlike a nicotine product, which obviously is addictive and can lead to a lot of cardiovascular health effects, can lead to cancer, etc., there are a lot of benefits to using our devices. So one of the very first activities I do with my students is I ask them, what are your likes about technology and your devices, and what are your dislikes? And I think that's important to set them up and create that tone of, I'm not going to tell you to do a detox. I do want us to identify the positives that come from our technology. And then I want us to also identify the negative things that come from technology. And let's have a discussion about how to minimize those so that we are living an intentional life with our device use, and we know what that looks like. Our students certainly experience decreased productivity as a result of constant multitasking. So while we have multiple screens in front of us, we're often jumping back and forth from one screen to the next, or from one task to the next. And we know that task switching can add up to about a 40% loss in productivity per day. When students are using their devices off topic in class, we know that it impacts their ability to take quality notes, to remember the information well, to perform well on tests. But we also know that it impacts the people who can see their off-topic laptop as well. So studies are showing decreases in their test scores related to the content that's being shown that day. Sleep was a really easy one for me to start to build into our already existing programs. So just the delayed release of melatonin and the brain activity that occurs from our device use certainly decreases our quantity and quality of sleep. We know that students are experiencing increases in feelings of anxiety, depression, and ADHD. Social comparison runs high, disordered eating practices, and low boredom tolerance. The last piece I'm going to talk about is the impact of social isolation, disconnection, and loneliness. So with mental health, this is, again, another American College Health Association statistic. What we did was we looked at, this is coming from Jonathan Haidt and Jean Twenge, and the link to this is in the notes as well. So they looked at mental health diagnosis since 2010, and they found with college students that the increase in anxiety rose 134%, depression 106%, and ADHD 72%. We, of course, can point some of this to decreased stigma and our students getting the care that they need around these mental health issues, but there is a lot of research to correlate with device use as well. So what ultimately is the solution? Last year, we spent a lot of time interviewing students. I took in a lot of post-assessments from workshops that I was teaching, and I asked our students, how can we make Virginia Tech a more digitally mindful environment? So the practices that I'm going to be talking about are based in evidence that I have dug deep for, but they're also based in student reflections and comments. So here is one of my peer educators talking about it.
I think the biggest challenge is that people have an all or nothing mindset with technology. They think it's all bad or it's all good and that they need to do it all the time or never. But understanding that there can be a balance of technology use and balancing the good with the bad to make it work for you is something that would definitely be important for students. I think the biggest challenge is
does not like to get out of this particular slide for some reason. Okay. So Christina's platform was JOMO, the joy of missing out. And what I really enjoy about her platform and what college students enjoy is that it's about digital intentions and it's not a detox. What I found is that students do not like to be told that they should never be on our phone. So what we've done over the past year is create messaging that more discusses outcomes that our students would want from their college experience and helping them be mindful about how they align their device use with their desired college goals. So JOMO is number one, it's just fun to say. The focus is less on setting limits on technology and more on creating positive conditions for more life-giving engagement. So you can sort of see here in some of our poster examples, the joy and the here is grounded in color and liveliness and laughter. And the not here is that black and white moment of being by oneself and behind a screen. So what does that balance look like, and how do we even figure out what it looks like and what it is? The Digital Wellness Institute has a free tool. So if you just type in individual digital flourishing, I of course have this linked in the notes here. It's going to provide you with a free, it takes about 4 minutes survey. And the survey asks about 5 questions each in each of these 8 categories. So our device use as it impacts our productivity, environment, communication, relationships, mental health, physical health, quantified self, and digital citizenship. And what I like about this particular tool is that it helps students see practices both online and offline, and it gives them really tangible examples of how a device can impact productivity, how we are or not expressing digital citizenship. And so the examples, it really looks like living in harmony with both our physical and our digital environments, enjoying strong relationships online and offline, building healthy physical and digital practices. So this is a great tool to start off with if you all just want to get that conversation started with clients, with other departments that you're working with. It's a free instrument, and it gives you some additional material on the back end. So this is another one of my students, and she was talking about what really made a difference for her.
But just providing that information of like, how can we make it better, you know, taking breaks from screens or using like focus modes if you're on an iPhone to like reduce distractions, like turning off notifications from like non-human like apps and stuff like that. I think that just like providing more information, because I'm not sure that everybody knows how to be digitally well, and I don't think that it's right of us to just expect like, oh, you're on your phone too much, like stop. That's just not a realistic expectation. We need to provide like actionable steps. And that was what really helped me going forward, is like actually being like, this is something I can do, and making sure that they're realistic and like small steps that will lead to a bigger goal.
So that's what I really wanted.
But
within the digital flourishing tool, after you take the assessment, it actually gives you a report on the back end, and it's going to provide scores for each of the 8 categories and identify areas of strength and areas where you can improve if you so choose. And I love that it also gives you concrete action items to start off with. So as a provider, as someone working with students, you don't need to just pull those out of thin air. They are nicely packaged for you here already. I probably do need to disclose, I do not make any money from the Digital Wellness Institute or off of Christina's work. We paid to have them, to have Christina work with us, but I do not receive any sort of benefit on the back end. So just do what you want with this information. It's certainly not a sales pitch. Okay, so one of the big pieces that we see impacting our students is how we are using it to connect. Of course, when I ask our students for the pros and the cons of their device use, the very first thing they say they like about their device is that it actually serves as a connection tool. It helps them stay in touch with friends and family. I really appreciate, and this is coming directly from the Surgeon General's recommendations that we'll talk about in a moment. It offers routes for social participation for those with disabilities, whether that is a social anxiety or a physical disability. Our students have a way to connect, and it also creates opportunities to find community. Virginia Tech is a 35,000 plus student campus, so we do have over 800 student organizations. That can be a lot spot for someone to navigate and for them to find their people. So I love that technology does provide a pre-connection point for students to explore our student organizations, find a connection, maybe do all of that virtually. And then once they feel comfortable or figure, yes, this is an organization I'm interested in becoming part of, then they go to the meeting. But that takes out a lot of barriers on the front end. We know what's harmful is that when our students are using technology so much, it displaces in-person engagement. So when a person comes to campus as a freshman, they're turning to their phones so much that it's delaying the onset of friendships here on campus. It's preventing that chit chat that's really essential for just creating a sense of belonging and well-being on this campus. And it just keeps them feeling homesick for a long time rather than helping them establish who they are on campus. We also know that face-to-face interactions and conversations are decreased in integrity as a result of the presence of a device. So what we really want students to focus on is making those connections. And the Surgeon General released an advisory in the May of 2023. If you had not seen it, it's a fantastic read. And what they found was they were really looking at some key data as it relates to health and risk of disease. And they found that lacking social connection is as dangerous as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. So what we really want to do is encourage our students to make those essential connections. One way to really gain involvement from your students is to start just small outreach events or ways to ask them for their connection with their device. So we did a quick outreach at our beginning of the year event where we asked students, what's your favorite thing to use your phone for? And what do you want to blow your phone off for? And then we gave them bubble wands, which are surprisingly popular. And we just asked them a few questions, and I gave them categories for where they want to blow off their phone more. So was it social, classes, sleep, being present, self-comparison, time suck, or other? And the favorite things, these sort of tracked with what I hear in classes that I'm teaching. They related their relationship with their phone. You can see here, a lot of them felt like the relationship was fairly decent. And then you can see really the sleep was something they wanted to blow off their phone for more, classes, time suck, social, etc. What we also asked them was, what are 3 things that would help you be more device free? And you can read, they're kind of funny, like burning your phone, focusing on other activities, knowing about its negative effects, trying to be less socially anxious. So some of the recommendations were fine, but a lot of them relied on willpower or gatekeeping. They relied on finding something better to do and getting other people on board with it. And then a lot of people know what to do, but they don't know how to do it, or the environment doesn't support it because everyone else is still on their phones. So this is just a really simple graphic, but what we know is that before social media and devices, everyone was sort of forced into the situation where they had to go through the discomfort of chit chat and being in a space with nothing else to really distract them. But what if I now decide, okay, I want to develop relationships. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to go into a lobby or a lounge, and I'm going to hang out in that public space to try to connect. But if everyone else in there is still on their phones, then I'm still disconnected, and so are they. It's just that how we're disconnected looks different. So Sean Killingsworth is a student who lives in Florida who created an organization called Reconnect. And I want to quickly, I'm going to just
Kids
send
are
that video
lonely,
to you.
not only
For the sake of time, you will get to watch that. But he really talks about how students are now lacking the skills to socialize and to be in the same space together without their phones. They just don't know how to do it anymore. So providing those kind of skills seems to be very essential to helping our students move into a better connected and academically successful space. So here are my top 5 recommendations for how you can increase connection, mental health, and academic success for your students. Number 1, use that digital flourishing survey to begin conversations and increase awareness. Provide tools and practice opportunities for conversations and connections. And we'll talk about what that looks like in just one moment. You can do some education and integrate challenges. So the iPhone effect talks about how the mere presence of a mobile device during a face-to-face conversation impacts social interaction. So what we are trying to teach our students is how to have chit chat and conversation again. We've made conversation cards that we put in phone boxes in the dining halls. And those seem to be very popular. The students don't necessarily use the box, but they do love the conversation cards. Another really easy thing is maybe at the beginning of a meeting, just have everyone pull out their phone and share a recent fun time. It's a good way to start creating connection in a way that feels comfortable at first. So I have a link to cheaper phone boxes that you can have at your institution. We really want our students to focus on finding better things to do that are rewarding, that make them want to get off of technology. Another practice that our students suggested is just putting up signs. So we have a bunch of visual posters that inspire our students to get off of their phones. These were hung in the dining hall. We also have signs that are hung in residence halls, and we're going to put them in the library. We have t-shirts for weekly winners of digital wellbeing challenges. I'll get to a little bit more in 1 minute. I've also created deep connections with our Office of Undergraduate Education. We've created a series of 2-minute videos and slides that the instructors, the faculty can choose to use in their classes whenever they want. So it supports academic learning and device use, talking about how device use in the classroom impacts their learning, and then best practices for how to increase focus. You can go directly to our website and pull. We have a series of 16 weekly challenges, and these are posted in all of our residence halls. So weekly, they have a different challenge that's posted. Our RAs post them. And if a student participates in a challenge, they submit a reflection. There's a QR code connected to it. And it looks like this. So this is an example of a weekly challenge. So set time limits on apps to make time in real life. And then for any person who submits a reflection, I pull a challenge winner and they get one of these t-shirts. We also have a more formal 4-week digital wellbeing challenge practice that is done with communities that are already established. So if you have living learning communities, we do this, and it requires a 1-hour workshop that I teach, and then they do the digital flourishing survey, and then weekly they're given a choice of interventions related to each one of these topic areas. They do one of those practices, they watch a quick video piece of education, and then they submit a weekly reflection. That also provides them with an environmental piece within their community. So each week the poster series goes up connected to that particular topic. And this is just a reflection of a participant. Okay, so the last thing I want to provide you all with is your tips and resources. So I have a bunch of really great resources here that you all can read through, listen to. This, the Virginia Tech Unwind Offline provides a series of questions and other practices to consider. And here's some other information about what we've done at Virginia Tech. I thank you all so much for your time. I know that I've gone a little bit over. I want to be mindful of the next part of your session. but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. Also very happy to set up a Zoom meeting at another time and we can talk more about integrating these practices onto your campus.
Thank you, Lori. Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Okay.
Lori, love this presentation. Thank you so much. Do you have any books that you would recommend for anybody that would like to kind of dig in deep for learning more about digital wellness?
Yes. So the Catherine Price book. So she is the on that resources slide. Let me just look on this other laptop here. I actually started off reading her book and I think it's a very easy read. So it's catherineprice.com/screenlifebalance. Her book is How to Break Up with Your Phone. And it is just an absolute series of like, here's what you do next. Here's what you do next. And it's a lot of my interventions are based on things from that book. It's I have gifted it to students. It's like I literally like sit on the toilet and you're laughing. It's super hilarious. So I would start with that. She also has a follow-up book that is called The Power of Fun. And it really is grounded in, okay, so you're going to get off your phone, but what are you going to do? So it fills that void. Yeah. And she has a bunch of free resources as well. So if you sign up for her like digital toolkit, you can follow her newsletter. Christina Crook, The Last Link. Obviously, that's who I partnered with. I think Catherine's book's a bit easier to read personally. I think Christina's brilliant and she's got some great tangible practices, but I think for a college student or like college practices, How to Break Up is great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right. Oh, Dawn, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a quick, comment. When working with students, I notice that they do socialize, but it's on different platforms. And I know a lot of my students use Discord, and they will, they have friends from all over the world.
Yeah.
And they will form these social groups. I have ones that will have watch parties like with movies and they'll get together and watch movies, but it's on this social platform on the computer. So I notice a lot of students use Discord.
I know, and it's really hard because we need that in-person connection, for our serotonin. We need practices in person again. And I think that online platforms are great for staying in touch with folks who are not in your physical space. But I think that really we try to teach our students about how important in-person connection is as well. And really when we do, one of the most helpful tools that I do is I ask students to like set out their college goals, not just academic, set out their top three goals, write actual activities they can do to achieve those goals. And then I have them look at their device use and identify like, what are your top 3 to 5 most used apps? What are your intentions behind using those apps? And they cross-check. I say, look at your top goal, your top apps, and ask yourself, does this app support me achieving any one of these goals? And if the answer is no, put a line through it. And that's just a space. It's not good or bad, but that's a space for you to now do something that more aligns with what you want to get out of your college experience. And you now have activities that you can follow. But it is hard if someone's saying like, yeah, I feel great with just using online platforms. Yeah.
I actually know of a couple professors on our campus that if a cell phone goes off while they're teaching, they dismiss the student directly from class. They ask them to leave. And they're not real popular professors, but
Right.
they probably are paid more attention to. And I wondered too, I know there's several counselors on here today. Are there any counselors that require their students to turn off their digital devices when they come into counseling sessions. I don't, but that thought came to me that maybe I would consider that, and maybe they would get a little bit more out of my session.
Oh yeah. Research says they would. You could have a little phone box. I mean, like you could just be like, here, like, here's your phone box. I want you to get the most out of today's session. Now they'll cite it as a safety issue. A lot of times we run into that. Professors, so when I was working with our Office of Undergraduate Education, we worked on creating syllabus policy statements for device use in the classroom. And that's some of what my slides that I created for use in the classrooms addresses, like the information and the education about how off-topic device use impacts their learning and their academic space and how it impacts others. So it's not just about them, it's impacting their classmates. But I think it would be helpful if, as an institution, there was a policy that said, we're not using these in the classroom across the board, because you're right, it punishes the professor in the long run.
Sean, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to I think what Dawn said. The question I have is like for changing of the dopamine level you mentioned in your speech.
Yeah.
Is there a study like a Pavlovian response of social engagements with people rather than being on digital devices? Because if you look generationally, you know, it used to be don't speak unless you're spoken to. So you didn't have interactions as a kid. I'm a Zennial, you know, from like 1980. So, you know, we passed notes around to each other, you know, for social gathering, or went to someone's house to play Nintendo or Sega, right? Aging myself, right? Atari. So, and then you go to nowadays when these kids, I mean, my children are born with a cell phone from birth.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, it's so new. Is it more of we need to identify how to act with them and change the response rather than change the child's response to the digital engagement?
Oh, well, so youth is different, and video games are so gosh, you know what, I'm gonna look up. I watched this amazing it was a virtual education piece, but it was about gaming addiction and children, and basically it was a psychologist who specializes in this, and he said that something like a video game and social media, it's high dopamine activity release, so we're flooding our brains with dopamine, and then when they step away from it, their mood is dysregulated, they're mean, they're hard to be around, and so his practice recommendation really was, if you have someone who is on for 5 hours at a time, you need to get their brain back into a reset mode. So 1 hour on a high dopamine activity balanced with, and he really said for most cases, no more than an hour, balanced with an hour of a low dopamine activity, like playing a musical piece or playing outside or doing a project. So we really want a sort of like a sprinkle rather than a deluge of dopamine, but having them bounce that out. I will try to find that particular webinar because it was fantastic.
Any other comments or questions? This has been great.
I am an addict too. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes.
Well, you can practice that. Yeah, these are really good questions. I have probably 5 hours of presentation content, so my apologies and the brevity of this. But I'm super happy. Like, if your question didn't get answered, I'm happy to hop on a Zoom and talk with each one of you, because we could talk all day about it.
We appreciate it, Lori. Yeah, we'll have the link to the slides in the recap email as well if you haven't opened them from the chat here. So you'll have access to all those resources. But then, yes, if you need to get in contact, please let us know. But Lori, we really appreciate it.
Thank you all. And Jay, can I send you or Carolyn the follow-up on that particular webinar on video gaming?
You can send it to me
Okay,
and I'll make sure everybody gets it.
perfect. Well, thank you all so much.
All right.
But
Okay, we will then transition to the discussion forum today. Margaret's submitted one, so we want to thank Margaret for doing that and sharing it today. So let me pull it up real quick, Margaret, on my end, and then you can just walk us through it. I think because of time and that we only have about 15 people on, I think we can stay together in one group instead of doing the breakouts like we've done in the past. So we'll just go ahead and do that. But Mark, give me 1 second and we'll be good to go. Okay. Go ahead and take it away. I will scroll it as you need. Hope you're on mute, Margaret.
I got a new laptop and I'm just struggling with it.
You're good now. We
Mightily.
hear you.
Yeah. And I just realized that that the information about the case didn't get in here, and I don't know why. But just some background on this. We had a young lady, sophomore, who had some depression, mental health challenges her freshman year here. She also had a number of relationship issues that occurred. Came back to campus this fall and continued to experience some interpersonal difficulties with members of a sports team that she was on, as well as family losses. But to make a long story short, she shortly into the semester reportedly took several over-the-counter antacids in what she said was an attempt to harm herself. When I got the referral, she denied being suicidal, but I began working with her using the CAMS assessment and format because I really like that. I did refer her to student health, and the practitioner wrote her a prescription for an antidepressant. She was on medication for ADHD. However, she was not taking it as prescribed. She was not taking it at all at that point. Doing pretty bad academically also. What kind of really, the situation escalated one evening when she was really dysphoric and very, very upset, and she put out her medications onto her pillow and shared that with everybody on Facebook. And her friends automatically alerted everybody on just about everybody on campus, and the RAs and folks intervened. And then I saw her on an emergency counseling session the next morning, which she again denied being suicidal. However, she does have a past history of attempts in the past, at least her report, before she even got to campus. So my question was, and I'll back this up by saying I came out of working in an inpatient psychiatric unit for 16 years before I got here. Our practice at the hospital with folks who took overdoses or made a gesture like that would be to recommend that someone else keep their medications for safekeeping and kind of monitor their usage, which is not something that we can necessarily do on a campus. So what we ended up doing was providing her with 2 times a week counseling sessions. Each time I did a CAMS assessment, we worked on some of her interpersonal issues. After the second incident, the prescribing practitioner wrote her medications, her antidepressant, to be dispersed on a weekly basis rather than a full month supply. We did get her to notify her parent, and the dean of students talked to the parent regarding the actions that we had taken. And what resources we had hooked her up with and the limitations of her being on campus. We did discuss her with the threat assessment team biweekly, and we encouraged her to use a number of campus resources. She ended up withdrawing from the university and going back home, which kind of everyone felt like that was probably the best thing for her to do, both academically as well as for her mental health. So my question was, what practices or policies regarding medication safety do other universities have where students have made gestures, posted threats, etc., but they don't meet criteria for inpatient treatment, or they've just gotten out of a facility?
Anybody has any thoughts on what they do, please unmute or put them in the chat. No comments on on medication policies or how they've handled maybe a similar situation in the past as well.
I think it would be great to have a policy, but we don't.
Okay. So Timothy, can you expand? Have you come across a situation like that? What you've done since you don't have a policy? Or
yeah, I've had students who have come from inpatient who are discharged on meds and meds that they could very easily overdose on. And we contract out with a local health provider. So we have a health center on campus, but it's a contracted provider, the local medical center. But I have never tried to work with them maybe to hold the medication. I mean, I've made suggestions before that maybe a roommate or a friend or a family member, if they're local, hold on to the medication and dispense it for safety's sake. Whether or not it was ever followed through with, I don't know. But, a lot of our students, I told our students when they go in for like depression and they start on an antidepressant, one of the most dangerous times is after you start on medication, because when you're depressed, you really don't have the energy. And then you give someone the medication, they're still depressed, but in the first couple of days, the medication gives them their energy back. And inpatient, that's when people with the most at risk of overdosing is right after you give them an antidepressant. So, but thank goodness, now we have had a couple people overdose on medications, but again, wish we had a policy, and I don't know that anybody wants to take on that responsibility of monitoring that. I think that might be one of the issues. So
yeah, that's been our big issue on campus here, is that we don't feel like it's right to ask a roommate or someone else to assume that responsibility because of the liability. If it was an employee of the university, that's a huge liability. So it's a really difficult situation. Particularly, this particular individual lived across the country, so family was not readily available. Usually when family's readily available, we will bring them into the treatment plan or at least use them as resources. But that wasn't possible here.
I'll weigh in on this. I'm Chelsea. I'm the Director of Student Health at Fairmont State University. I see it a separate way. I think a medication policy where we would be administering or monitoring their medications seems really risky and not appropriate at all, in my opinion. And if a student has been inpatient and started on medications, the assumption should be at discharge that the treatment team knows the student's going back to residential housing and has discharged them home with those medications, understanding the circumstance. And in my experience, especially with Chestnut Ridge and Morgantown, if there is an issue and the providers did not think that person was capable of coming back to campus, that's usually discussed either with the students, or if, sometimes they'll discharge them home to the supervision of their parents, especially if meds need to be looked after by somebody else. But as for our personal responsibility in this, I don't think that, especially with these adult students, whether they live on campus or not,
I don't think it's our responsibility in any way to keep a medication policy. That's just my 2 cents on it. I think there's too much liability.
Yeah.
And honestly, you know, there's so many things that they could get their hands on and overdose.
Right.
That's just how I feel about it.
I agree that the university controlling the medication is not the answer here at all. But I don't know, just some thoughts about how we can keep people safe. Again, this was a situation where this girl, if I had tried to get her admitted to the hospital, I doubt that she would have met criteria, because she denied being actively suicidal. But she was definitely on our radar for probably 2 months, until she went home.
Any other comments from the group? Tough one for sure. For sure. All right, Margaret, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and present that. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody for coming to today's session. We'll have the recap email come out. Just as a reminder, that email comes from the ecosystem. It will not have my name in the address box. So just be on the lookout for that, but it'll have all the same content from the emails before, links to the YouTube video, the slides, all that. So be on the lookout for that. And then we will meet again on December 5th. So we look forward to seeing you guys there. And as always, appreciate you taking the time. All right, take care.